Do you need to be underweight to have an eating disorder? The short answer is no. The long answer is also no. No, the answer is no. This is a common, this question, I've gotten this question a lot from a lot of different people who typically are, of course, outside of the eating disorder world. This is a common misconception, and it's also kind of a simple question that we don't ask ourselves a whole lot. Oftentimes, just maybe because we assume that in order to have an eating disorder, you need to be already really skinny. So why is this assumption so dangerous? Well, because people with an eating disorder might not even realize that they have it, because they think that in order to have an eating disorder, you need to be skinny. And if they're not extremely underweight, they might just write it off. This is also a dangerous thing because parents, friends, or colleagues, or other people who may be able to recognize and catch the symptoms, they might not realize, and they might write off those symptoms just because someone is not severely underweight. And doctors can even say everything is completely fine if someone is within a healthy BMI range. Because people don't really know that you can have an eating disorder and not be underweight, sometimes a lot of people slip through the cracks and end up having to deal with a lot of these things for a long time, when in fact it could have been caught early had people been able to recognize the symptoms that lead to an eating disorder. I was hospitalized because of my anorexia, but it really took a lot to get to that point. I really started showing signs and symptoms of my eating disorder, of anorexia, pretty early on, but it took a little bit for some physical traits to develop, like for my hair to start falling out or for my skin to start turning gray, like a gray yellow. We went to a pediatrician and we went to a physician, and each time that we went, we were basically told 3 times that I was within a healthy weight range because of the BMI scale. The BMI scale is basically a body mass index that is used to determine a healthy weight standard for a lot of different people. So the problem that was happening was that I actually had anorexia during this time, but that I was going to these doctors and they were saying that I was completely fine because I was within the normal BMI range. And so they basically told me to either just eat healthy or to just stop doing what I was doing. And I was 13 at the time. The doctors were only looking at my weight, and they were not even thinking anything remotely close to my mental state, which is what an eating disorder is. An eating disorder is all based around mentality, perception of weight, and perception of food. So I technically was not underweight according to this BMI scale. I was not outside of the normal healthy range, and yet my body was still deteriorating, and I was still developing extreme anorexia nervosa. Eventually, I was able to get into recovery. I was hospitalized and went through recovery a couple times, but I want to read to you kind of some definitions of eating disorders in general, okay? This is from the American Psychiatric Association, saying, eating disorders are illnesses in which the people experience severe disturbances in their eating behaviors and related thoughts and emotions. People with eating disorders typically become preoccupied with food and their body weight. Notice how there's no indication in this definition of low weight whatsoever. It's all focused on eating behavior, thoughts, and emotions. Now, again, typically the end result, of course, in an eating disorder is going to be, as time continues to pass, a low weight. If we can catch things like this, signs and symptoms like this early enough, then it can be prevented. Hospitalization can be prevented. Another definition from the Mayo Clinic. Eating disorders are serious conditions related to persistent eating behaviors that negatively impact your health, your emotions, and your ability to function in important areas of life. Again, a huge focus in this definition of eating disorders, again, on emotion, behavior, and health. At the same time, just because you're underweight does not mean that you have an eating disorder. I've also had guys come to me and ask me, or tell me basically, that they're really tall and really skinny and that they don't eat a lot, and asking whether that means that they have anorexia or not. And no, not necessarily. It's not the case. Anorexia, again, is all a mentality. It's a mentality. And for me, it was a perception of my own body, kind of a body dysmorphia mixed with really a desire to change who I was, and change by restricting calories, restricting food, ultimately losing weight. But all in all, it's really important to understand that You don't just have to be extremely underweight in order to have an eating disorder. If people can learn to catch these things early, typically because the person who's going through it themselves might not be able to even recognize it themselves and probably won't. It's really important to be aware that people are going through this, that this is a thing that both men and women walk through, and then you can literally save someone's life if you can catch it early enough. People are literally passing away from conditions like this, and that is why the severity of recognizing it is so important. So I've been through anorexia, but I'm really curious to hear what you all are going through or what you think someone else is going through. Shoot me a DM on Instagram. I'll link to my Instagram in the description below. And if you want to hear my full story, I put out another video on my channel where I walk through just what I went through with anorexia in general, my whole story from start to finish, basically going from 13 years old all the way through college when I regressed. So thank you all so much for watching. Keep an eye out, please, for people who are going through, potentially might be going through this. I'll see you next time.